Introducing our 2022 beautiful Raw Beauty Ambassadors.
Hi, my name is Carolyn, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence. My story began several years ago. I was in my mid-20s when I met my ex, and at first he was that mysterious one. My parents raised me in a very kind of loving home, but very traditional, very strict. And I come from the Caribbean, so it was just a different environment. And when I met him, he was that dark, mysterious person, and someone who didn't say much, and I was intrigued by it. And not only that, he didn't fit the mold of what I had been raised to look for in a significant other or a partner or a perfect match. And I was slightly becoming a bit rebellious, and I started questioning, it's from society and things of that nature that can kind of lead you to having these thoughts. And the first year or so, he gave me a lot of attention, and I was incredibly impressionable. And now I realize, looking back on it, I was being groomed. And the real physical abuse didn't really start happening until after about 2 years into the relationship or so. But he had a mental hold on me already. After the first year, I had already started distancing myself from my family. I started looking at my family differently, started looking at my friends and loved ones. I didn't want to be around them so much anymore. And I was quite isolated. 3 years into the relationship, the abuse started really happening more frequently. And by 5 years into the relationship, I just didn't even know who I was anymore. I didn't even recognize the person that was in the mirror. I didn't really like looking at myself in the mirror, and I didn't really want to be around anybody. The only time I was really social was when I was with him, and that was very unlike me, complete opposite of where I came from and what was true to me. I realized that something had to change, and I knew that this was not my life's purpose, and this was not meant for me. I know a lot of people talk about hope. I found hope to be a bit dangerous in my situation. I was hoping that we would get better. I was hoping that I could have the life that I saw my mother's parents live out, being married for 73 years. I felt like it was almost my birthright to be with my partner at a young age and to live out this dream of having a family and following in my grandmother's footsteps. And that really wasn't me. And that's okay. But I still kept forcing a toxic situation to make it into something that it wasn't. And then once I started realizing, getting more back into myself, I started visualizing and dreaming. I was dreaming about the life that I wanted before I met him. And then I was also dreaming of what my life could be without him. 8 years, 9 years into the relationship, I dreamt that if I got a second chance at life, that I would live my best life. And 10 years into the relationship, I realized I might not live to get out of this relationship. And I just started dreaming and visualizing more. And coming closer to the 13th year of my relationship, I gave him an ultimatum. I told him that I believed that he could be better and that we could be better. And if it didn't get better, then I was gone after a year. And I think that was my fatal flaw, my fatal mistake, because the abuse got on another level. And then there were hostage situations. I was being kicked in the stomach a lot. I was going to work late a lot. I started off prior to my relationship and at the beginning of the relationship being roughly 10 to 15 minutes early for work, or right on time, to coming in 15 minutes late for work, and even later because of him. Because he wouldn't let me go to work, he wanted to have a power struggle and to keep me in a place of obedience to him. And I started slowly packing my things in plain sight. So I just started purging throughout that whole year, and I realized that this wasn't going to happen. I even did a getaway by myself, and I had to lie to him. In order to have my weekend getaway, I went to New York. I checked into a luxury property, and I had the best weekend connecting with friends and to have a feeling of freedom. And even though I was in New York and experiencing and reconnecting with loved ones, I used to live in Paris when I was younger. I was connecting with a friend of mine who was there, and childhood friends and so on. All these things to kind of help me get a sense in terms of who am I now, and connecting with the young Carolyn that had all these dreams. And I realized that I was going to have a lot of work to do. He had no clue that I was there, and that freedom felt amazing, but I wasn't sure if I was going to make it out. And almost right on close to a year, about the 11th month into my ultimatum, it was the worst beating I ever had. We got into an argument, and he disrespected my mother, and I wasn't tolerating it anymore. And I wasn't afraid anymore. I started becoming chronically ill. I developed asthma from my abusive relationship, from the grief and the fear. And when I started doing the processing and the purging and the work, my physical body started getting ill from releasing all those toxins. And it was a very interesting thing how the body was mirroring what was in my mind and what had happened with my mind. I was held hostage for almost 24 hours and beaten repeatedly, and a pillow to my face. He was trying to suffocate me. And anyone with asthma can tell you that when you're just coming off of a bout of really bad asthma, you don't really have much breath in you at a time. And I started playing dead. I decided if I just laid there limp, that he would not be as aggressive. And it took some time, but then in my mind I realized, I could die today, but if I do, I want to know that I gave it my best fight. So I realized it was a bit psychological and a bit physical. And then I realized I had to be less physical and more psychological. Continued until he had to go to work. I waited for him to get on that bus to go to work. And I frantically ran around the house, packed some things, and went away for a couple of days with a family member, and then strategized on how I was going to move out. Thankfully, I had already packed everything in plain sight. It just looked like storage containers that had been sitting there all along. It was just a matter of me getting there when he wasn't there. So I engaged him and told him that I would like to have a talk. So by this point, I had been gone a week. And he was at work, and I kept engaging him like I was going to meet him at work, so he would wait for me. We both worked in restaurants. And while he was at work thinking I was coming to meet him, a new colleague of mine at a restaurant that I had just started working at, I hadn't even known her a month, she showed up for me. She drove from Annapolis, Maryland to meet me in DC, came with her brother's truck, and we packed everything up. It started pouring with rain, and I moved out. And she risked her life because there was a lot of fear of him coming home. And if he came home and she was with me, I was not sure how that was going to go. So we moved very quickly. And that was it. I never looked back. But it wasn't the end of the story. He kind of chilled out for a moment. And then maybe a year or two after, he started stalking my parents, stalking me. And it was a process. It was a process of forgiveness for myself. And then I only was able to forgive him maybe 5 years after I had distanced myself from all of it. It took me quite some time, but I really focused on myself. And I would say that if you want to get out of a situation like that, you first have to have a community and people that you really can count on and trust. Build that community up. Visualize what is it that you wanted to do with your freedom, because it's not promised to all of us. It's our birthright, but it's not promised to all of us. And it just took one decision for me to realize that I couldn't actually have my freedom taken from me just by putting myself with the wrong people. And have your community. Also visualize what is it that you want for your life and stick to it. keep focus on the main goal. And it sucks. I hate to say it, but it's true. Healing from anything is ugly, it's horrid. You face your demons, you face your darkness. But with all of that, your dream is the light. And if you can keep focusing on the light, you actually start reconnecting to the light that you were born with in the first place. And you can then receive the gifts that were meant for you from day one. And I will say that that really helped me get through, was just focusing on the light. And, in any religion or faith, there are so many cultural universals of the light. Sometimes they call it God, sometimes they say Allah or Buddha. But it's interesting how all of these different faiths all come to one thing, which is the light, because that's what we're made of. And it is your divine right to live out your purpose. Sometimes these situations help us see more clearly what our true purpose is. And if you're really able to heal that darkness and learn how to integrate it with your life, you will then find purpose and you will see how a path is made out. And it comes out, it just unfolds. That's really what I want to say. The path unfolds in front of you. I do believe God wrongs all rights. I have gone to court for protective orders. I have fought in the past to bring justice, but it's not that easy. I remember when I was talking to the Assistant Attorney General for Domestic Violence, he said, well, he doesn't have much of a record. And I said, well, how many people do you know who are actually being abused, really turning their abusers in the moment? And he got quiet. And in that moment, he realized that he was going to go ahead and press charges. My ex went into kind of hiding a little bit. He laid low, kept a low profile, and knew that my restraining order was going to end in a year. And in DC law, you have to come back up to court again to do the same thing. And I didn't have any more of that in me, quite honestly. So I'm not really sure if justice really happened the way that I had hoped it would be. I will say I did see him several years later and I didn't recognize him. He looked like a homeless person, but he wasn't. So I can see that life did catch up to him. Was he aware that life had caught up to him? I'm not sure. People like that tell themselves a whole bunch of untruths and they come across in a completely different way. So I'm not really sure. I did fantasize that, that someone would hurt him, really badly. I would have fantasies about it, not me hurting him physically, but I wanted him to be hurt the way that he hurt me. And I wanted him to feel the fear that he put in me. So I'm not really sure. I think that that's to be continued. But I feel that I have a loving marriage. I've been with my husband 7 years married. We have a wonderful son and we're a blended family. I have a lot of peace. I have a lot of love. He has created a safe space for my demons and I've created a safe space for his. And I think this journey has helped me actually be able to love in a more wholesome way, like in a more full way than before. And in part because I've taken time to love myself. And I've taken time to thank myself and to thank my body for showing up for me, to thank my body for seeing me through, and to thank myself to believe that, and believing that I could follow my dreams, and they're starting to unfold now. I think it's like wrapping a bow on a chapter or a book or a moment that you've gone through in your life. Wrapping a bow for closure. And to take time to reflect on the strength that it takes to fight for your life and for your quality of life and for your peace. I'm Carolyn. I'm a fairy and I'm raw beauty proud.